Hey everyone, welcome to the first official progress-based devlog for my turn-based indie RPG, Honor for Hire. The main focus of today's devlog is going to be planning out features for the game and creating pixel art for it. If you were wondering where I've been, well, my life has been quite chaotic recently and I haven't had a ton of time to work on the project. But before I dive into what I've accomplished in the past couple months, I just want to give a huge shout out to everyone who watched my first devlog. In no world would I have expected to receive so much attention on that video. I am thankful to each and every one of you for helping make this dream become a reality. I mean, heck, we almost hit 1,000 subscribers with just a single devlog, which is just mind-boggling. So with that out of the way, let's dive into some planning aspects. You may have spotted this in the previous devlog, but the program that I use to plan out almost every aspect of Honor for Hire is a website called Trello. It's completely free and it allows me to keep my project organized and manage my tasks, something that's extremely important to my development process. There are a couple of different ways that you can set up a Trello board. You can have all the tasks that need completed in a to-do category that slowly gets emptied over time as more and more tasks get completed, or you can do the method which I prefer, which is assigning a color tag to each item. I then group them based on the type of task to be completed rather than its status. As you can see here, I changed the color of the tag based on the progress of the work to be done, so I have red for tasks that I haven't started, yellow or orange for ones that are in progress, and green for tasks that I'm completed with. It's not a final list because I add new items whenever I come up with a new idea or realize that there's a system that needs to be implemented, but it helps me keep track of the tasks that I have to do. So a lot of my time after I released the first video was spent on getting my ability sheet cleaned up and moving all of the abilities into Trello. Due to the fact that I can have item descriptions on each of the cards, I can quite easily take the ability descriptions and move them. Before I did that though, I went through and balanced a few of those abilities. Of course, they'll always be subject to change, and you guys can feel free to suggest any different or new abilities. I had a really great comment on improving combat diversity and avoiding it becoming a slap fight to the death, and so I'm making sure that the abilities all affect the battle in some powerful or unique way based on the strengths and weaknesses of the character in question. Once I had those looking a bit more unique and balanced overall, it was time to take them into Trello. The way I accomplished this was by making a new list for each of the characters and their abilities. I can use this system in the future to add new abilities easily and change them when I need to, and I can also put enemies, their unique attacks, and their animations all together. There's also some more fancy behind the scenes type features in Trello, but I'm not going to worry about those for now unless the project gets exponentially more complicated, which by all appearances it will at some point. Now before I dive into pixel art, what have I been doing in Godot as of late? Well, it's mostly been preparing the project to integrate some more large features such as new animations and functionality, and possibly starting to lay out a demo. One of the comments I received had a really great idea for the room transitions by having them sweep out directionally based on where the player enters and exits from. The animation for top-down was tedious to make since it's just a bunch of squares over and over again, but luckily for me I don't have to make all 4 directions because Godot allows me to reverse the orientation of animated sprites. So from there, it was a simple matter of hooking up the directions to the room transition scripts and room manager scripts. Speaking of those, I had an idea for how to simplify them and make sure there's no excess spaghetti code later on in the project. Since there are only going to be 4 entry and exit points for each room at the max, I can have 4 room transition scripts in total throughout the project, 1 for each direction. The way I accomplish this is by storing 4 variables for next room in the room manager script and setting their values there instead of having the scene to be opened in the script for the transition itself. I know this all sounds a bit complicated, but basically I'm taking the next rooms for each room and storing them at the local level. This allows me to have the same 4 scripts for every single room and simply change the variables that are accessed. I think cutting back on excess code through means like this and simplifying things as much as possible should definitely be one of my priorities. But now, it's on to the exciting stuff, pixel art. I got a ton of comments about the art style, as well as a few on how it can be improved, and so I'd like to dive a bit more in depth on how I create art, as well as make some new assets and changes. So at this point, I've been working with pixel art on and off for about 4 years, and I've made quite a lot of progress from that point in time. As mentioned in the previous devlog, I work in Sprite, which in my opinion is one of the best pixel art programs out there. The way that I start making a piece of art is just by doing a simple outline at first. I want to get the basic shapes down before I do anything too complicated with shaping or colors, so with this goblin tent that I created, I just started with what I thought a tent would look like from the perspective of my game. I can use the other assets as a reference for that as well. I then add the colors that I'm considering and play around with those for a while, which sometimes takes me an hour or two of design to settle on the final colors. With these goblin tents, I shaped them a bit more realistically and started adding these little patches of fabric where the goblins have repaired their damaged tents. I might add more variation than just these 5 that I made, but it all depends on how big the goblin camp area in the meadow ends up being. I then designed some more props for the camp. This certainly isn't all that I'll have there, but I made a skull torch of sorts, a little flag that I can animate, and a couple of spears sticking out of the ground. I really want to give the goblins some personality and a unique setting, so I'll definitely focus on that as I keep developing the meadow area. I also made the preliminary design for the campfire that will act as a save point, but since it's such an important sprite and I don't really like how it turned out, I plan to revise it in the future. Before I go into some of the changes I'm considering, I want to show how I animate sprites. I created 2 more goblin enemies and have been animating them one direction at a time, and I'm almost finished with the non-attack animations. I can use my previous animations as a reference for how the arms and legs should move in most cases. I then have to focus on how I want the sword to look using previous directions as a reference. When's the sword behind him? How far does the arm swing with it? What frames does the height of the sword reach its max? As I work through the animation process, I consider these questions and work around them accordingly. At this point, I have all of the basic animations done for both this mini-boss type goblin and the smaller dagger wielder. I'm quite pleased with how these turned out, and I think using the knight as a basis was a good call. It definitely made animating the sword easier. On to some of the suggestions you guys had for me. The first one that I saw a lot of was also in the topic of animations, a death animation. This should be fairly simple, so let's get started. I think the way I want it to look is having the enemy flash white as though hit before dissolving into particles. The other suggestion I had, and one that I want to ask your guys' opinion on, is the outline color of the sprites. The suggestion in this comment was to make the outline color a darker version of the sprite's primary colors, and so I think I'll get to work switching the colors out. Of course, I'm making a copy of my sprite sheet so that I can revert it back if you guys think it doesn't fit the game. I think one of the primary benefits of doing it this way is improving sprite consistency. This way I don't have to worry as much about what color of outline goes where. On the other hand, I do need to consider more thoughtfully what colors I should use and where I use them on my smaller sprites, as I don't want them to lose the sharpness that they had. Honestly, now that I'm finished with it, I really like this change. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you prefer the black outlines, the colored ones? I'll make sure that I keep both on hand so that I can change it back one way or the other. The only bad part about switching the outlines is having to re-import all the sprites that I put into the engine already, but that shouldn't take too long if I do end up making the switch. Now, what's next? Well, I've got quite a lot of options for things to work on in the next few weeks. In the next devlog, I think the main focus will be on improving game feel through things like screen shake and beginning to code the goblin boss and his attacks. This will prove a great starting point for unique enemy movesets. Make sure you join my newly started Discord server and share any ideas that you have for art or the game itself. I'm quite open to new ideas. If you want to submit any art for the game, make sure it's in the indiedev 64 color palette, which a link to can be found in the description along with the link for the Discord. I promise that the next devlog won't take so long to come out. Things are thankfully slowing down a bit in my life, and school is finally out, which is quite a relief. And once again, thank you all for the attention on the last devlog. I've always wanted to go into game development, and the success of that video allows me to pursue that path in life, so I'm very grateful. Thank you all for joining me again, and as always, take care.